Cub freezes on train tracks. A tiny passenger pulled the emergency lever. Just in time. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The evening train to Pinewood Valley rattled along the tracks, cutting through the misty forest as dusk settled over the wilderness. Inside the third carriage, 4-year-old Oliver Reed pressed his small nose against the window, his breath fogging the glass as he clutched his worn teddy bear. The rhythmic clacking of wheels against rails had nearly lulled him to sleep when something caught his eye. A flash of movement in the undergrowth alongside the tracks. "Look, Mr. Growls," Oliver whispered to his teddy bear, pointing with a chubby finger. "Animals!" His mother, Savannah Reed, glanced up from her book with a tired smile. "Yes, sweetie. Lots of animals live in these woods." She smoothed Oliver's unruly curls before returning to her reading, unaware of what was about to unfold. The train rounded a gentle curve, its headlights sweeping across the darkening forest. In that beam of light, Oliver spotted something that made his heart skip. A small, fuzzy creature stumbling onto the tracks. It wasn't a deer or a fox, but a bear cub, its chocolate-brown fur glistening in the light as it froze, paralyzed by the approaching train. Oliver's eyes widened. The cub's terrified expression mirrored his own rising panic. His heart pounded as he realized no one else had noticed the danger. The conductor was focused on the controls. Other passengers dozed or chatted softly. Even his mother had drifted into her book again. "Mama! Bear! Bear!" Oliver tugged at his mother's sleeve, but Savannah misunderstood. "Yes, Oliver, that's your teddy bear," she said, without looking up, patting his hand reassuringly. The train continued its relentless approach toward the frozen cub. Oliver could see its tiny body trembling, could almost feel the fear radiating from the young animal. Without understanding why, tears welled in his eyes. Something inside him knew this was wrong. The tiny bear shouldn't be alone, shouldn't be scared, shouldn't be in danger. A memory flickered in Oliver's mind. A bright red handle he'd seen when they boarded the train. "For emergencies only," his mother had explained when he'd pointed at it curiously. Was this an emergency? The grown-ups didn't seem to think so. They couldn't see what he saw. The cub remained frozen, its eyes reflecting the train's headlights like two terrified stars in the gathering darkness. A soft whimper, barely audible over the train's rumble, escaped from the cub's muzzle. Somewhere in the forest, a deeper, more urgent growl responded, the mother bear perhaps, desperately searching for her baby. Oliver squirmed out of his seat, his teddy bear tucked securely under one arm. Savannah, engrossed in her novel, didn't notice as her son's feet hit the floor of the carriage. The train lurched slightly around another bend, causing Oliver to stumble. He grabbed the edge of an empty seat to steady himself, his determined gaze fixed on the red emergency lever at the end of the carriage. The distance seemed enormous to his small legs. The train's whistle blared, a warning that went unheeded by the petrified cub. Oliver took one step, then another, his heart racing faster than the train itself. He had to hurry. He had to save the bear. No one else would. With each step, the cub grew closer in the train's headlights. With each second, the possibility of tragedy increased. Oliver's tiny shoes squeaked against the floor as he half walked, half ran toward the emergency lever, driven by an instinct he was too young to name, but too human to ignore. 3 seats ahead, a man in a weathered ranger uniform shifted in his sleep, his hat pulled low over his eyes. The badge on his chest caught Oliver's attention for just a moment. Ranger Thomas Bennett, Pinewood Valley Wildlife Preserve. The ranger mumbled something incoherent and turned in his seat, remaining lost in dreams, unaware of both the child's mission and the cub's peril. Oliver paused, wondering if he should wake the ranger. Grown-ups knew what to do in emergencies, his mother always said, but the train was moving so fast now, its metal wheels grinding against the tracks with increasing urgency. The cub had managed to move slightly, but only to press itself flat against the rails, as if trying to disappear into the cold metal. Its small paws trembled visibly even from this distance. "No time," Oliver whispered to Mr. Growls, clutching his teddy bear tighter. "We have to be brave." The carriages swayed suddenly as the train took another curve, sending Oliver tumbling into the lap of an elderly woman he hadn't noticed. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and startled blue eyes peered down at him from behind thick glasses. "Goodness me!" she exclaimed, steadying Oliver with gentle hands. "Where are you going in such a hurry, young man? Where's your mother? Bear!" Oliver pointed frantically toward the window, tears welling in his eyes. "Bear, baby! Train, go fast!" The woman, Lily Morgan, according to the name tag pinned to her nurse's uniform, squinted out the window, but from her angle the cub was no longer visible. She smiled kindly and patted Oliver's hand. "What a wonderful imagination you have," she said softly. "But you shouldn't be wandering around alone. Let's find your mother, shall we?" "No!" Oliver wriggled free from her grasp, determination blazing in his eyes. "Emergency!" He bolted away before Nurse Morgan could catch him, his small legs pumping with desperate energy. The train's whistle blared again, longer this time, as if sensing the impending danger. Oliver stumbled once more, catching himself against a seat back, his eyes never leaving the red emergency lever that seemed to grow more distant with each passing second. Behind him, he could hear Nurse Morgan calling out, her voice tinged with concern. Ahead, the emergency lever beckoned like a promise. Outside, the cub remained frozen, its fate hanging by increasingly fraying threads of time. The overhead lights flickered suddenly, casting momentary shadows across the carriage. In that brief darkness, Oliver thought he heard something else, a deeper, more guttural sound from the forest beyond the tracks. The mother bear was close, drawn by her cub's distress, her powerful form moving parallel to the train through the dense underbrush. Oliver's heart hammered against his ribs as he realized the danger was now twofold, not just to the cub, but potentially to everyone on the train if the mother bear decided to intervene. He had seen a nature show with his mother once, where the narrator had spoken in hushed tones about how protective mother bears could be, how their strength could bend metal, and their determination could overcome any obstacle when their cubs were threatened. The emergency lever was just 5 steps away now. 4. 3. Oliver stretched out his small hand, fingers splayed wide, reaching desperately for the bright red handle that promised salvation. Behind him, he could hear rising voices. Nurse Morgan had alerted other passengers to his unsupervised journey, and the commotion was growing. "Oliver!" His mother's panicked voice cut through the noise. "Oliver Reed, where are you?" 2 steps, 1. His fingers brushed against the cold metal of the lever, just as the train's headlights fully illuminated the cub's terrified form. In the same moment, a massive shadow emerged from the trees alongside the tracks. The mother bear, her eyes reflecting fury and fear in equal measure as she spotted her trapped offspring. The world seemed to slow around Oliver as he wrapped his fingers around the emergency lever. He could see everything with startling clarity, the cub's trembling body, the mother bear's desperate charge toward the tracks, his own mother's face as she spotted him at the far end of the carriage, the sleeping ranger jerking awake at the commotion, Nurse Morgan's outstretched hand trying to reach him. With a strength born of desperate necessity, Oliver pulled the lever down with all his might. The effect was immediate and jarring. A high-pitched alarm blared throughout the train, and the emergency brakes engaged with a screech that seemed to tear through the very air. The sudden deceleration threw passengers forward in their seats. Bags tumbled from overhead compartments. Drinks spilled across tray tables. And Oliver, his small body unprepared for the violent stop, was flung backward like a rag doll. He might have crashed hard against the floor had it not been for the quick reflexes of Ranger Bennett, who lunged from his seat just in time to catch the boy. They both tumbled to the ground in a tangle of limbs, the ranger's body cushioning Oliver's fall. "What in blazes?" the ranger began, his voice trailing off as his eyes moved to the window and registered what Oliver had seen all along. "Dear God," he whispered, his arms tightening protectively around the child. Outside, the mother bear had reached the tracks, her massive form looming over her cub, as the train's momentum carried it forward despite the engaged brakes. For one heart-stopping moment it seemed the train would still hit them both, a tragedy doubled by Oliver's brave but futile effort. But the train shuddered to a halt mere meters from where the bears stood, close enough that the headlights cast the pair in stark relief against the darkening forest. The mother bear reared up on her hind legs, her 7-foot frame towering over the tracks as she roared a warning at the metal beast that had threatened her child. The sound vibrated through the train's structure, sending a primal shiver down the spines of every passenger. Chaos erupted inside the carriage. Passengers shouted questions and complaints. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, demanding to know why the emergency system had been activated. And through it all, Savannah Reed fought her way down the aisle toward her son, her face a mask of fear and confusion. "Oliver! Oh my God, Oliver!" She dropped to her knees beside Ranger Bennett, who still held the boy protectively. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Before Oliver could answer, the train lurched again, not from movement, but from impact. The mother bear had slammed her powerful paws against the side of the lead carriage, testing its strength, her primal instincts urging her to eliminate the threat to her cub once and for all. "Everyone stay calm and move away from the windows," Ranger Bennett commanded, his training taking over as he gently transferred Oliver to his mother's arms. "We've got an angry mama bear out there, and she's not thinking rationally right now." The passengers scrambled to comply, pressing toward the center aisle. Nurse Morgan appeared at Savannah's side, her experienced hands quickly checking Oliver for injuries. "He's fine," she assured Savannah. "Just shaken up. Your boy is quite the little hero, though I don't know yet why he pulled that lever." "The baby bear," Oliver said, his voice small but steady as he looked up at the adults surrounding him. "It was stuck. It was scared." Ranger Bennett's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The cub was on the tracks," he said, looking from Oliver to the window and back again. "And you saw it when nobody else did." Oliver nodded solemnly, clutching Mr. Growls to his chest. The ranger moved cautiously to the window, keeping low and to the side as he peered out. What he saw made him catch his breath. The mother bear had abandoned her attack on the train and was now gently nudging her cub with her nose, coaxing the frightened youngster to its feet. The cub wobbled shakily, clearly terrified but apparently unharmed. "I'll be damned," Ranger Bennett murmured. "The kid saved that cub's life." The conductor appeared at the end of the carriage, his face flushed with anger as he stormed toward them. "Who pulled that lever? Do you have any idea what an unauthorized emergency stop costs the company? The scheduled disruption alone?" He fell silent as Ranger Bennett stepped forward, blocking his path to Oliver and Savannah. The ranger's face was stern as he flashed his badge. "Thomas Bennett, Pinewood Valley Wildlife Preserve," he said firmly. "And before you continue, you should know that this emergency stop prevented what could have been a tragic wildlife incident and potential derailment. There was a bear cub on the tracks and its mother nearby." The conductor's face paled slightly. "A bear? But how did anyone even see—" "I did," Oliver said, his voice stronger now as he peeked out from behind his mother's protective embrace. "I saw the baby bear. It was crying." All eyes turned to the small boy, whose innocent face showed no guile, no understanding of the magnitude of what he had done. For a moment, the carriage was completely silent, except for the distant sounds of the mother bear shepherding her cub back into the safety of the forest. It was Nurse Morgan who broke the silence, her wrinkled hands clapping together once, decisively. "Well then," she said, smiling at Oliver with newfound respect, "it seems we have a little wildlife rescuer among us." But the danger was not yet past. As the passengers began to relax, a new sound penetrated the relative quiet, the unmistakable crack of a branch breaking under significant weight. And it came not from the side of the train where the bears had been, but from the opposite side, deeper in the forest. Ranger Bennett tensed, his hand moving instinctively to where his tranquilizer gun would normally be holstered, only to find empty air. He was off duty, headed home after a long shift. His eyes scanned the darkening trees beyond the opposite window, years of experience telling him that something was wrong. Very wrong. "Everyone get low," he ordered, his voice cutting through the renewed murmurs of the passengers. "Now." Savannah pulled Oliver to the floor, covering his small body with her own, as the other passengers scrambled to comply. Outside, the shadows shifted, and a pair of eyes reflected the train's lights, eyes that were neither ursine nor harmless. "Mountain lion," Ranger Bennett breathed, the words barely audible yet carrying the weight of serious danger. "Must have been stalking the cub before we came along." The predator's sleek form became visible as it emerged from the underbrush, powerful muscles rippling beneath its tawny coat. Its attention was fixed not on the train, but on the retreating forms of the mother bear and her cub. In the confusing tableau of scents, sounds, and lights, the great cat had identified an opportunity. A distracted mother and a vulnerable cub. "It's going after them," the ranger said, his voice tight with professional concern. "That mother's already agitated. If the cat attacks now—" He didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone in the carriage understood the volatile nature of the situation. A territorial dispute between powerful predators, with a defenseless cub in the middle. It could end badly for all involved, including potentially the train passengers if the battle spilled back toward the tracks. Oliver squirmed in his mother's protective grasp, his eyes wide as he watched the mountain lion begin its stealthy approach. "No," he whispered, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "No hurt baby bear." The conductor had made his way to the front of the carriage, speaking urgently into his radio. "We need wildlife services at mile marker 47, Pinewood Valley line. Multiple large predators near the tracks. We've got a Thomas Bennett on board, ranger from the preserve." But help would take time to arrive, and the drama unfolding outside wouldn't wait. The mountain lion had begun its stalk, moving with liquid grace through the undergrowth, closing the distance to the bears with each passing second. Ranger Bennett's mind raced through possible interventions. The train's horn might scare off the cat, but it could also provoke the already agitated mother bear into attacking the train. Moving the train forward wasn't an option with wildlife so close to the tracks, and stepping outside to intervene personally without proper equipment would be suicidal. "Sir," a quiet voice broke through his tactical calculations. A man had risen from his seat halfway down the carriage, a tall, lean figure with the weathered complexion of someone who spent his life outdoors. Jacob Hayes, forest guide. I've got a deer call in my pack. Might distract the cat long enough for the bears to get clear. The ranger nodded sharply. Do it, but be careful. We don't want to draw its attention to the train. Hayes moved with quiet efficiency, retrieving a small wooden instrument from his backpack. He positioned himself near a partially open window, took a deep breath, and blew into the call. The sound that emerged was a perfect imitation of a wounded fawn, high-pitched, vulnerable, and irresistible to a predator's instincts. The effect was immediate. The mountain lion froze mid-stalk, its head swiveling toward the sound, ears pricked forward in sudden interest. A new, easier prey had announced itself, momentarily diverting the great cat's attention from the bears. Sensing the shift in the predatory landscape, the mother bear seized the opportunity. She herded her cub deeper into the forest with increased urgency, her massive body shielding the youngster as they disappeared into the protective cover of the trees. For a tense moment, the mountain lion remained torn between its original prey and the tantalizing new sound. Then, with a twitch of its tail, it turned fully toward the train, its predatory focus now fixed on the source of the deer call. "That's not good," Hayes muttered, lowering the call. "I think I just made us the target." The cat began moving toward the train with deadly purpose, its powerful shoulders rolling with each silent step. Its eyes, fixed on Hayes's window, glowed with hunter's intent in the fading light. "Everyone stay absolutely still," Ranger Bennett commanded, his voice steady despite the escalating danger. "No sudden movements, no sounds." Oliver, still held tightly in his mother's arms, watched with a mixture of fear and fascination as the magnificent predator approached. The mountain lion was now less than 20 yards from the train, its movements slowing as it assessed this strange metal prey that smelled of humans but had somehow produced the sound of a wounded deer. Inside the carriage, passengers held their breath collectively. Nurse Morgan's hand found Savannah's shoulder, offering silent support as the young mother clutched her son. The conductor stood frozen by the internal phone, unable to complete his call for assistance. Hayes gripped the deer call tightly, regret etched across his features as he realized his solution had potentially made things worse. It was in this frozen tableau of human fear and feline curiosity that Oliver suddenly remembered something important. Something that had been tucked into his small backpack by his grandfather just that morning, before he and his mother had boarded the train to visit family in Pinewood Valley. "Mama," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "my air horn. For bears. Grandpa gave it." Savannah's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Her father, an avid hiker and outdoorsman, had indeed given Oliver a small, compressed air horn earlier that day, explaining to the boy that it was just in case you see any bears on your forest walks with Grammy. At the time, she had thought it an unnecessarily cautious gift for a 4-year-old, but her father had insisted, demonstrating how to press the button on top to release a warning blast of sound. "My backpack," Oliver continued, pointing to the small Spider-Man bag that had fallen beside their seats during the emergency stop. Ranger Bennett overheard the whispered exchange and shot a questioning glance at Savannah, who nodded confirmation. With slow, deliberate movements, the ranger reached for the backpack, careful not to make any sudden gestures that might provoke the approaching mountain lion. Outside, the predator had closed half the remaining distance to the train, its curiosity gradually giving way to caution as it detected the concentrated human scent. Still, it continued its approach, drawn by the lingering memory of the deer call and its predatory instincts. The ranger's fingers closed around a small red canister in the backpack's side pocket. He extracted it carefully, recognizing the compact air horn immediately, It wasn't Wildlife Service-grade equipment, but it might be enough to startle the mountain lion away from the train without the prolonged noise of the train's horn, which could re-aggravate the recently departed bears. "When I give the signal," he whispered to the carriage at large, "everyone cover your ears." Passengers complied silently, hands moving to protect their hearing. Oliver buried his face against his mother's chest, his small hands pressed tightly over his ears. Ranger Bennett positioned himself at the window nearest the mountain lion, the air horn gripped firmly in his right hand. The cat was now barely 10 yards from the train, its powerful form tense with predatory anticipation mixed with instinctive caution. It paused, one paw lifted delicately, nostrils flaring as it processed the complex scents emanating from the strange metal object before it. That moment of hesitation was all Ranger Bennett needed. With precise timing, he pressed the button on the air horn, directing its blast out the partially opened window. The sound that erupted was shockingly loud in the confined space of the carriage despite everyone's covered ears. A piercing, unnatural shriek that cut through the evening air like a physical force. The mountain lion's reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. It leaped backward as if struck, its sleek body contorting midair in a display of feline agility that would have been beautiful if not born of sheer terror. Upon landing, it immediately bolted for the safety of the forest, its powerful legs carrying it away from the perceived threat at breathtaking speed. Within seconds, the predator had vanished into the undergrowth, leaving only swaying branches and disturbed underbrush as evidence of its passing. A collective sigh of relief swept through the train carriage as passengers cautiously uncovered their ears, exchanging looks of disbelief and nervous laughter. "Well done, Ranger," the conductor said, his previous annoyance replaced by grudging respect. "And thank you, young man, for having that horn." He nodded toward Oliver, who was peering out from the safety of his mother's embrace, eyes wide with residual fear and excitement. "Not my idea," Ranger Bennett replied, handing the air horn back to Savannah. "Your son is the real hero here, twice over." He smiled down at Oliver, his weathered face softening. "First the cub, now this. You've got good instincts, kid." Oliver didn't fully understand the ranger's words, but he recognized the praise in the man's tone. He offered a shy smile in return, clutching Mr. Growls tighter as his mother stroked his hair with trembling fingers. "I Savannah began, her voice catching with emotion. "I can't believe he saw the cub when no one else did, and then knew to pull the emergency lever." She shook her head, torn between maternal pride and retroactive terror at what might have happened. "Children often notice what adults miss," Nurse Morgan said, patting Savannah's shoulder sympathetically. "They haven't learned to filter their perceptions yet. To your boy, that bear cub was as important as any human child, worth saving at any cost." The train remained stationary as Wildlife Services were contacted, and the conductor received clearance to proceed. Passengers gradually returned to their seats, the shared danger having forged a temporary community among strangers. The story of Oliver's bravery spread through the carriages, growing slightly with each retelling until it reached near mythic proportions by the time it reached the dining car. Ranger Bennett remained with Savannah and Oliver, answering the boys' increasingly animated questions about bears, mountain lions, and forest life with patient expertise. The professional concern on his face gradually gave way to genuine amusement at Oliver's curiosity and earnestness. "You know," he said to Savannah during a brief lull in Oliver's questions, "we have a junior ranger program at the preserve for kids who show a natural affinity for wildlife conservation. It's usually for older children, but exceptions have been made." He glanced meaningfully at Oliver, who was now contentedly drawing a picture of the rescued bear cub on a napkin. Your son has good instincts, really good instincts. Savannah watched her son with new eyes, seeing beyond the typical 4-year-old exuberance to something deeper, a natural empathy that extended beyond human boundaries, a courage that defied his tender age. He gets it from his father, she said softly, a hint of old pain coloring her words. Michael was a wildlife photographer. He died in the field 2 years ago, rock slide in Montana while tracking wolf packs. Understanding dawned in the ranger's eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said simply. Then, after a thoughtful pause, "Your husband would be proud today." The moment was interrupted by the conductor's voice over the intercom, announcing that Wildlife Services had given clearance for the train to proceed and apologizing for the delay. The massive engine hummed back to life, and the train began to inch forward once more, resuming its journey through the darkening forest. As they picked up speed, Oliver pressed his face to the window again, his eyes scanning the forest anxiously. "Bears okay?" he asked, his breath fogging the glass. "The bears are fine, sweetheart," Savannah assured him, pulling him close. "Thanks to you, they're safe in the forest now." But Oliver's attention had shifted to something new, a subtle movement in the trees running parallel to the tracks. As the train rounded a gentle curve, the headlights briefly illuminated a remarkable sight. The mother bear and her cub moving steadily through the forest, the younger animal now prancing with renewed energy. And for just a moment, though later Savannah would convince herself she had imagined it, the mother bear seemed to turn her massive head toward the train, her intelligent eyes finding Oliver's window as if in silent acknowledgement. Then the train rounded another bend, and the bears were lost from view. Oliver settled back against his mother's side, a contented smile on his face as the excitement of the day finally caught up with him. Within minutes, his eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted into sleep, his small body relaxing completely for the first time since spotting the cub on the tracks. As Oliver slept, the adults around him spoke in hushed tones about what had transpired, the remarkable chain of events, the unlikely hero in the form of a 4-year-old boy, the multiple dangers averted through chance and quick thinking. None of them noticed when the train passed a small wooden sign, half hidden by encroaching vegetation, marking the boundary of a wildlife corridor established 3 years earlier after a passionate campaign by a wildlife photographer named Michael Reed. The coincidence would remain unknown to them, but throughout the remainder of the journey, Savannah felt an inexplicable sense of her late husband's presence, a comforting warmth that followed her and Oliver as the train carried them deeper into a future suddenly rich with new possibilities. Ranger Bennett remained nearby, his conversation with Savannah turning from the day's events to more personal matters. Her plans while visiting Pinewood Valley, how long she and Oliver would be staying, whether they might have time to visit the wildlife preserve during their trip. His professional interest in Oliver's actions had clearly evolved into something more personal, though he maintained a respectful distance that Savannah, still navigating the complicated terrain of widowhood, appreciated. The train continued its journey through the gathering darkness, its passengers forever changed by what they had witnessed. A small boy's instinctive compassion becoming the thread that connected human and animal lives, preventing tragedy through the simplest and most profound of actions, seeing what needed to be seen, and acting when action was required. As the lights of Pinewood Valley Station appeared in the distance, Nurse Morgan leaned across the aisle toward Savannah. "Your son," she said quietly, her eyes twinkling with wisdom born of decades of observing human nature, "is going to change lives, mark my words." Savannah smiled down at Oliver's sleeping form, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "He already has," she whispered, thinking not just of the bear cub but of the strange, beautiful connection that had formed among the passengers. Strangers united by unexpected danger and unexpected courage. The train began to slow as it approached the station, its journey nearly complete. But for Oliver and Savannah, a new journey was just beginning, one that had been set in motion by a child's compassion and a bear cub's fear. Circumstances colliding to create something remarkable and enduring in the fading light of an ordinary day made extraordinary. 3 months later, the summer sun filtered through the towering pines of Pinewood Valley Wildlife Preserve, casting dappled shadows across the small gathering assembled on the observation deck. At the center of attention stood Oliver Reed, his small frame nearly swallowed by the miniature ranger uniform he wore with solemn pride. Beside him, Savannah watched with glistening eyes as Ranger Bennett, Thomas, as she now called him, knelt down to Oliver's level. "Oliver Reed," Thomas said, his official ranger hat temporarily abandoned for the occasion. "It is my honor to present you with the Pinewood Valley Wilderness Protector Badge, the youngest recipient in the preserve's history." A polite round of applause rose from the small crowd. Preserve staff, local officials, and several familiar faces from that fateful train ride 3 months earlier. Nurse Morgan dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Jacob Hayes, the forest guide whose deer call had nearly backfired so spectacularly, nodded in approval. Even the train conductor had made an appearance, his initial anger long since replaced by bemused respect for the child who had disrupted his schedule but saved a life. Oliver accepted the badge with unusual gravity for a 4-year-old, his small fingers tracing the outline of the bear paw embedded in the metal. "Thank you," he said clearly, the words rehearsed, but the emotion behind them genuine. Thomas smiled and ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. "Ready for the special surprise now?" he asked, his eyes flickering briefly to Savannah for final confirmation. At her nod, he straightened and gestured toward a side trail leading away from the observation deck. "This way, everyone." The small procession followed him down a winding path that descended into a secluded valley. Oliver clutched his mother's hand tightly, practically vibrating with anticipation. Thomas had been mysterious about this part of the ceremony, saying only that it was something Oliver needs to see. They emerged into a sun-drenched clearing bordered by a small, crystal-clear stream. Thomas motioned for everyone to remain at the edge of the trees, then guided Savannah and Oliver forward to a wooden blind, cleverly disguised with natural materials. "Very quietly now," he whispered, helping them into the structure, "and look there, by the fallen log." At first, Oliver saw nothing but the peaceful forest scene, sunlight on water, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze, birds flitting between branches. Then a movement caught his eye, and he gasped softly. A bear cub, larger than when he'd last seen it but still unmistakably young, tumbled playfully near the fallen log. It pawed at something in the grass, rolled onto its back, then scrambled upright again with the boundless energy of healthy youth. And watching from a short distance away, her massive form relaxed but attentive, was the mother bear. "Is that?" Savannah began, her voice hushed with wonder. Thomas nodded. "We've been tracking this pair since the incident. They're thriving. The cub is growing strong, and the mother has proven herself an excellent provider." He looked down at Oliver, whose eyes were wide with delight. "I thought you might like to see what you saved." Oliver watched, transfixed, as the cub continued its play. After a few moments, he turned to Thomas with a solemn expression that seemed far older than his years. "They're happy," he said simply. "Yes," Thomas agreed, his hand coming to rest lightly on the boy's shoulder. "They're very happy and safe." The three of them watched in companionable silence, until the mother bear eventually led her cub deeper into the forest, disappearing among the trees with the same silent grace that had marked their first encounter. Only then did Oliver turn away from the viewing slot, his face alight with a joy so pure it brought fresh tears to Savannah's eyes. As they made their way back to the waiting group, Oliver skipped ahead, occasionally stopping to examine interesting leaves or rocks with the heightened curiosity that had become even more pronounced since that day on the train. Savannah and Thomas followed at a more sedate pace, their hands finding each other's with the easy familiarity that had developed during the past months. "You're sure about this move?" Thomas asked quietly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "Pinewood Valley is a far cry from the city life you're used to." Savannah watched her son crouch down to observe a line of ants with intense concentration, his new badge glinting in the sunlight. "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied. "Oliver needs this place, and maybe I do too." Their new rental cabin was small but cozy, situated at the edge of the preserve where Thomas could easily stop by after his shifts. The local school had already welcomed Oliver for the fall semester, excited to have a minor celebrity join their kindergarten class. And Savannah had found unexpected fulfillment in freelance editing work, which allowed her to maintain her career while embracing their new, nature-centered life. It wasn't what she had envisioned for herself when she'd boarded that train 3 months ago. A young widow simply taking her son to visit his grandparents, trying to piece together a life that had been shattered by tragedy. She couldn't have imagined that a bear cub in peril and her son's extraordinary compassion would set her on an entirely new path, one that somehow felt like coming home rather than starting over. As they rejoined the group, Oliver was already regaling them with an animated description of the bears, his hands gesturing wildly to indicate the cub's playful antics. The adults listened with indulgent smiles, occasionally catching Savannah's eye with knowing looks that spoke of the special place her son had carved in their hearts. The official ceremony concluded with a small reception at the preserve's visitor center, where a simple plaque would hang commemorating Oliver's quick thinking and compassion. As guests mingled over lemonade and cookies, the preserve director approached Savannah with an unexpected proposal. "We've been discussing a new education program," the director explained, "focused on teaching children about wildlife conservation through emotional connection rather than just facts and figures. Oliver's story is exactly the kind of inspiration we need." She paused, watching the boy who was now examining the center's interactive wildlife display with Thomas. "We'd like to develop it with your input, maybe even have Oliver help occasionally, if that's something you'd both be comfortable with." Before Savannah could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A park ranger burst through the doors, his face flushed with excitement. "Thomas, you need to see this," he called, gesturing urgently. "Everyone should see this." The gathering moved outside, following the ranger's lead to the edge of the parking area that overlooked a gentle slope leading down to the forest's edge. There, in the golden afternoon light, stood a sight that drew collective gasps of astonishment. The mother bear and her cub had emerged from the tree line and stood in plain view, a virtually unheard-of behavior for these normally reclusive creatures. But even more remarkable was what surrounded them. A small procession of forest wildlife, moving with strange coordination. A pair of foxes, a family of raccoons, even a majestic bull elk, its impressive antlers silhouetted against the descending sun. "I've never seen anything like this," Thomas murmured, his professional composure momentarily shattered by genuine wonder. "It's like they're—" "Saying thank you," Oliver finished for him, his small voice carrying in the awestruck silence. He stepped forward, instinctively reaching for his mother's hand, but his eyes never leaving the extraordinary tableau below. For several heartbeats, the forest creatures remained, forming an impossible gathering that defied natural behavior patterns and scientific explanation. The bear cub sat back on its haunches, appearing to look directly at the assembled humans, directly at Oliver. Then, as if responding to some silent signal, the animals began to disperse, melting back into the forest with the same mysterious purpose that had brought them together. Only the mother bear and her cub lingered, the larger animal rising briefly onto her hind legs, not in threat but in what almost resembled acknowledgement. Then she dropped back to all fours, nudged her cub gently, and together they disappeared into the shadows of the ancient forest. Silence held the human observers captive for several long moments. It was Nurse Morgan who finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "In all my 70 years," she said softly, "I've never witnessed anything so magical." The spell broken, murmurs of agreement and amazement rippled through the group. Scientific-minded staff members began offering potential explanations. Coincidental migration patterns, unusual weather conditions affecting behavior, the animals' curiosity about the human gathering. But Thomas caught Savannah's eye over Oliver's head, a silent understanding passing between them that transcended rational explanation. As the sun began to set, casting the preserve in hues of amber and gold, the guests gradually departed, still buzzing with excitement over what they'd witnessed. Eventually, only Savannah, Oliver, and Thomas remained, standing together at the forest's edge as twilight slowly claimed the day. "Do you think they knew?" Oliver asked, his small face titled upward questioningly. "That I helped the baby bear?" Thomas knelt beside him, adjusting the slightly too large ranger hat that had remained firmly on Oliver's head throughout the day. "I think," he said carefully, "that there are connections in nature that we're only beginning to understand, and sometimes, when we act with pure kindness, the world has ways of responding that we can't fully explain." Oliver considered this with the serious contemplation that often surprised adults who underestimated him. Then he nodded once, decisively, as if Thomas's answer had confirmed something he already knew in his heart. "Ready to head home?" Savannah asked, ruffling her son's hair affectionately. Oliver turned toward their cabin, then paused, looking back at the darkening forest one last time. "Goodbye, bears," he whispered. Then he took his mother's hand in his right and Thomas's in his left, connecting the three of them in a simple, perfect circuit of belonging. As they walked toward their new beginning, a soft breeze stirred the trees behind them. Perhaps it was just the wind, or perhaps it was something more, a gentle acknowledgement from a world Oliver had touched with his extraordinary compassion, a world forever changed by a moment when a tiny passenger pulled the emergency lever just in time. And somewhere deep in the heart of the preserve, a bear cub played beneath watchful maternal eyes, alive and thriving because one small boy had seen what others had missed, that every living creature deserves a champion, that courage has no minimum age requirement, and that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come from the smallest of hearts,